Well, my name is Diane Eastus Hall, but my maiden name was Diane Eastus Spinner. I was born in Hobart. I was a home birth because in those days hospital births were not encouraged because there were so many germs around and viral infections at that time. So I was born at 2 Ellington Road, Sandy Bay, Hobart, on the 24th of February 1933, to my mother Doris and my father William Richard Spinner and Doris Abbott. My mother did not have a middle name. Why, I don't know. It was at Sandy Bay, in the house that they had bought a couple of years before. It was only several years old. It was a house with a lovely view of the Derwent River right around to Hobart and Mount Wellington. It was on the slopes of Mount Nelson. My father was born in Croydon in England in, I think it was 1894. He joined the First World War at an early age and went into the Rifle Brigade, the London Rifle Brigade, because he was a crack rifle shooter. And there he was shot in the head and crawled for a long time through the mud at Flanders, where some other soldier had taken out the padding of his one of the masks, because it was the first gas attack that the British Army had experienced. This chap took out the lining and put the lining into my father's hole in the wound in the head and left him, and the Germans just went over the top of them, but he kept crawling through the mud until he was eventually rescued. After he had recovered, he went back to England and he was nursed for some months and then sent back to the front line. But this time not in the active duty of shooting, but helping with ambulances. And then the war ended, he went back, and then before the war actually, I should say that he worked for the railways, the Southern Railways, where he had a job as, beginning to be an accountant or something like that. Yes, but he was still traumatised and decided to see the world. And so he came out to Australia, and then he arrived in Australia, first of all, at Adelaide, where he left the ship that he was on and travelled somehow or other from Adelaide to Melbourne, and then from Melbourne to Hobart, which is where he stayed for the rest of his life. He met my mother, I'm not sure, probably 6 months or so after he'd been there, but he worked first of all up at the new power stations that were being built in Tasmania. And he eventually became the secretary of the Hydroelectric Commission in Tasmania. I have one brother who is 3 years older than me, Ralph. Ralph Easter's spinner. When I was in my last year at school, I decided that I would like to be a kindergarten teacher, but there was no kindergarten college in Tasmania. So my parents applied to Melbourne to find that Melbourne was full as far as borders were concerned, and they would not send me to Sydney because it was too big and too wild. But then they tried Adelaide, and they found that I could get into Adelaide, but not as a boarder in the first year. Second and third year, I would be able to board if I passed first year. But there was a YWCA down the road on Pennington Terrace. So my mother stayed at the, was it called the Grand Hotel? On North Terrace, and I went to the YWCA, and I was horrified by all the naked women lining up for showers. It just and then somebody suggested that I should go to the GFS, which was next door, which was the Girls' Friendly Societies. And once a girl turned 21, she was no longer accepted there. So I went there and shared a room with two others. One girl was in her 20s and another girl was a year older than me. And I had a marvellous year in a room with three girls, rather than in a dormitory with 15 or something. And the kindergarten college was really only a hop, step and jump away. And if you wanted to go into the city, it was just a short walk. Well, my friend Joan Burford, who was in my year at college, turned 21. And she had a party at, I think it was her family, no, it might not have been a family home. But anyway, it was a house or a building with a staircase. And at the bottom of the staircase, she and her close family all stood, whilst the rest of us were in an adjoining room where we could see them. And I was sitting in the front row, probably cross-legged or something, with a boy on one side and another one on the other side. I turned to one boy and he was deadly dull, so I turned to the other one, and that was Bob. I got on very well with him that day. Then, during the following week, I received a letter from him asking me to go out, introducing himself as boy that I'd met, and saying he didn't expect me to accept. But when I received this letter, I was at the kindergarten college, and I was in this really rather large rumpus room, and very quickly the letter was snatched out of my hand and passed around. Would have been at least 20 or 30 girls there. The letter was read out, and then people said, oh yes, they knew him, and that I should go out with him instead. He was a boy known as one of the boys at the Bay. He lived at Glenelg, and there was quite a group of them from various schools. Bob had, in his latter years, he won a scholarship to go to Scotch. But the boys, a lot of the boys were Saints boys, St Peter's or elsewhere, but they were all boys on the beach. In other words, they were all swimmers. And one of the girls was friendly with one of those boys, yes. He said to me, oh, one of these days I'm going to marry you, ask you to marry me. And I thought, oh, yeah. But I promised my mother I will not get married until after I finished my course. But of course, doing a double degree of architecture and engineer just took a little bit longer, didn't it, to get to that stage. And I thought, well, I'm not going to hang around waiting for him to finish his course and ask me to marry him. So I went with a friend to New Zealand for 6 months, and where we had intended to travel around, but not to hitchhike, but we decided that the places that we wanted to see were generally off the beaten track. So we hitchhiked for 6 months and worked in various jobs, such as waitressing, selling in a haberdashery department in a store, which they had in those days, which is where I was. I had to count out the number of buttons that somebody wanted. Of course, they didn't come in packs. If I wanted some ribbon, I had to measure the amount of ribbon and cut the ribbon and wrap it up. And then, of course, I had to add up what they owed, which was often rather difficult because they had, I can't quite remember now, what was it? We had sixpennies. Well, there was one coin that we didn't have, and I had to do my mathematics all the time to see that I was giving the right change. But then we waitressed, but we waitressed at the Grand Hotel. We didn't pick just any little hotel. We just walked in and said, do you need any waitresses? And they said yes. So we waitressed there for X number of weeks over Christmas and New Year, which was great fun. Actually, we worked in a tourist bureau at one stage for a while. Oh, that was cleaning windows. Because if we cleaned the windows, we got a free trip to wherever it was that we wanted to go. And then I went back to Hobart for the holidays, and then I came back to Adelaide and got a job. And that was sort of the end of it. I don't think he ever did. No, no, he didn't. He just said one day, oh, well, I think it's time we got engaged. Well, we did. And then I went home for the Christmas holidays with a ring on my finger, and Bob came over and met the family just after Christmas, and then we were married in May. And we had 63 years together. With only one argument of note, which I'm not going to tell you what it was about. But it was a serious argument, let's put it that way, very serious. And children, I've got Richard and Gillian, who was born in 61, and Mandy. So that's one boy and two girls. When I was at school, I was at Farn, which was an all-girls school, but we had competitions in Hobart run by the Life Saving Club. The competition was for the Shield, which was awarded every year, and the school that got the most people qualified in life-saving received the Shield. So if you did your bronze medallion one year, you would do it again the next year. If you did your bronze cross one year, you'd do it again next year, because you got more and more points, even if you repeated what you had done. So therefore, I had plenty of confidence in the water. So when it came to sailing, I knew quite a lot of boys down on the beach that had sailing boats. They were called rainbows, which were very new in those days, but they needed 2 people really to sail them. And I used to go down there, and they knew that I could swim and I could sail, so I often got asked if I would like to crew. And in fact, I do recall once being at home when the phone rang and my father came out and said to me, "Oh, it's one of those Catholic boys on the phone for you." And I knew what it was. It was he wanted me to crew. And the thing was, when I went crewing, all their sisters of these boys used to line up along a rail and stare at me because I was down there with all the boys and they could not swim. So therefore they were not accepted. Well, they couldn't go out sailing. So that was great fun, I must admit. The lovely thing was that there was no boy-girl relationship, it was just friends. And in fact, I think that sort of friendship with boys in Hobart went right through until even I got married. It wasn't those boys, there were another group of boys that whenever I came home from Adelaide at Christmas, they would always be knocking on the door. And they would come in and we'd play things like drafts and things like that. And when I had friends from the kindergarten college that would come home with me, or during the Christmas holidays they would come over for a couple of weeks, they were always knocking on the door to see who I'd brought with me. And they were great. One of them had a car, or I think he might have, and another one had a car, and another one had a plane. And I recall on one trip, this young chap took myself and a friend up in his plane. We flew down sort of southwest of Tasmania, and we landed on Lake Pedder. You might not know Lake Pedder, but Lake Pedder is a very large lake in Tasmania, near Frenchman's Cap. And Frenchman's Cap is a mountain. And it had a wide, white, sandy beach. The water was tan. It was tan because of the ferns that grow around the edge. And so we just landed there, and we all got out of the plane and we had a swim in this water. It wasn't the best. And then we got in the plane and we flew home. But since it was not long after that that lake was flooded for hydroelectric purposes. So the lake was dammed and flooded, and the beach disappeared. So something you couldn't do again now, but it's always been with me. So that's sort of things that I used to do. But then when I used to sail with that I was possibly a little bit older then, but when I might have been 19. But when I was 16, 17, with the boys with their rainbow boats, that was a very different thing. You went out and you sailed in these boats, and then you tried to make the other boat bottle, if you know what bottle means, sort of go over. Because when you're sailing, there's a give way. Somebody has to give way. And if you know the rules, well, you give way, and sometimes you go over in the process. So that was how we had the fun, was to make the other yacht topple over. I always loved gardening. I was always intrigued by botany. And then I did art when I was at school, So I had the basic training in art because I also did it for the leaving examination. But after... Oh, and when I was at the kindergarten college, I found that it was very good because we had to write storybooks and we had to illustrate things, or you had to copy something, and I could always do that fairly easily. Then in latter years, I decided I would like to paint plants, and so I had instruction for painting plants. But when I went to learn, it was only 1 or 2 days a week that I was doing it, but I was told I had to draw with a pencil for 12 months, which wasn't what I was expecting. I thought I'd, be onto the watercolour paints straight away, but it took 12 months. But in the end, I was very glad I had. Yes, I've enjoyed looking at plant life and painting it. Not that I've done any for a few years, but I've got a couple hanging up there actually. And there's an insect down the end there too. That wasn't plant, but that happened to be in our swimming pool at Belair, and I rescued it and got it out and I pinned it onto a board and paper, and then I drew it. Grandchildren, oh yes, I've got 4 of those, yes. 2 that are now in Canberra. In fact, they've lived most of their life in Canberra, and although their parents are back here in Adelaide, they are still in Canberra. One has just got married, but no offspring as yet, and then Mandy has 2. Yeah, so there are two boys and 2 girls. Yes, but they're best part of a decade apart, aren't they? Well, I enjoy scenery. I enjoy watching water. I enjoy plants. I've got some friends that I have a bit of fun with, I must admit still. In fact, I've got friends round here which are really, in the course of life, they are new friends, but they're friends of the last decade. So, possibly the main thing would be to be self-efficient and not to depend on other people. I suppose one learns as one goes on, yes. Bob and I did a trip on our own overseas once, which was very enjoyable. But we also, I think I'm going to get the muddled up now, did one when Bob was National President of the Architectural Association, and we went on an official world tour where we represented Australia at various conferences. Now that took us from starting in Singapore to Hong Kong to America, down into Mexico, then to Europe, to England. There were a couple of conferences there in different parts of England, and Holland, I think it was. Yes. That was round about. Took several months, which was very good. Even the visit to Buckingham Palace, had to be dressed up. And I took the clothes that I was going to wear, but it was so jolly cold I couldn't even wear those. I had to wear something else. Well, there were lots and lots of us dressed up. Main thing I remember is the photograph afterwards, outside Buckingham Palace, when we all lined up. I think it's mainly because I've still got that photograph. And because there was such a lot of people from the architectural conference that were from all over the world, they were dressed in their, Nigerian costumes and other African costumes, etc., whereas I was just in, something I had with me. Because I couldn't wear the outfit that I brought with me because it was too cold. We decided to go around New York, as one could, go right round, and we're on this boat, and all of a sudden a shot rang out, and the shot rang out, and I can remember for some reason putting my hand up like that and then looking around to see what had happened, and lo and behold, I was on the corner of a row, the aisle, and on the other side this person was shot. And therefore we had to pull over, and of course the police came. We weren't allowed off. We were all questioned, and the outcome of it was that it was probably it was somebody that was shooting from one of the overhead bridges, and possibly they had, in order to get into a gang, they had to shoot somebody. So it wasn't, and that person was unlucky. But it could have been me, because I was only 3 or 4 people away from that. So that was rather amazing. And the police procedure, golly, went on for about an hour and a half or something. One should always have one's own bank account, yes. Never just depends on your husband. Especially if money is left to you, to make sure that you have control of that your partner does not have control.